Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at how your company culture can actually impact Agile project management.
Good.
You give us a really cool research article. It's called How Does Organizational Culture Affect Agile Projects? The Competing Values Framework Perspective.
Yeah.
And it's from the Vine Journal of Information and Knowledge Management Systems. So we're going to be kind of breaking down the key findings and then trying to figure out how all the different types of cultures that are out there can either help or, maybe even hinder Agile success.
Yeah, it's a great study, and I think it'll be really relevant to, your interests
Yeah, for
in
sure.
agile methodologies.
So before we dive into the specifics of the research, let's just make sure we're all on the same page.
Okay.
When we say Agile, what are we actually talking about?
So at its core, Agile is a project management philosophy that's based on, flexibility and collaboration and continuous improvement.
Right.
The Agile Manifesto actually outlines 4 core values: individuals and interactions over processes and tools working software, over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration, over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan.
So it's really about being adaptable and being responsive to change.
Exactly.
And it's interesting because the research talks about these two different streams of Agile.
Mm,
There's a social stream, and then there's a technical stream.
okay.
Can you kind of explain those a little more?
Absolutely. So the social stream focuses on the people-centric elements
Right.
of Agile. So
Okay.
you're talking teamwork, communication, that ability to adapt quickly.
Mm.
The technical stream, as you might guess, is more about the technical processes
Right.
involved.
Okay.
So things like, coding, testing,
Yeah.
and deployment.
And this research is saying that both are really crucial for Agile to actually work.
Absolutely. You can't just focus on one or the other.
Right,
It's the interplay of these two streams that unlocks the full potential of Agile. Now, to understand how culture impacts these streams, we need to look at the competing values framework.
Okay.
And it provides a lens for understanding the dominant values and behaviors within an organization.
So how does this framework actually work?
Sure.
I'm curious to know how they define culture in a measurable way.
Yeah, so the Competing Values Framework, or CVF as it's often called,
Okay.
identifies 4 key cultural dimensions:
Okay.
hierarchical group, rational, and developmental.
Got it.
Think of it as like a map
Okay.
that helps us pinpoint an organization's cultural DNA.
Okay.
Each dimension represents a different set of values and priorities.
Okay, so let's start unpacking these different dimensions.
Okay.
First up, hierarchical. And the research kind of hints that this is where Agile might encounter some roadblocks.
That's putting it mildly.
Okay.
Think about it. Hierarchical cultures are all about stability and control and following established procedures.
Right.
It's your classic top-down management structure. While this has its place, it can clash with the flexibility and adaptability that are at the heart of Agile.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
So what specific challenges did the research find in hierarchical cultures?
So one of the biggest challenges is resistance to change.
Okay.
Hierarchical organizations thrive on predictability and order.
Right.
So the fail fast, learn fast mentality of Agile can be a hard pill to swallow.
And it's not just about individuals resisting, right? It's like the entire organizational structure is often set up in a way that reinforces that resistance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The research points out that rigid structures, formal communication channels, and a lack of transparency can make it really difficult
Yeah.
for Agile teams to self-organize and respond to changes quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're constantly waiting for approval from higher ups,
Right.
it stifles the agility that Agile is supposed to bring.
So it's like trying to run a sprint in a bureaucratic maze.
Exactly.
But even with all these challenges, the research did offer a glimmer of hope for these hierarchical organizations, right? It's not a lost cause.
Absolutely not. The research found that even hierarchical organizations can find success with Agile
Okay.
if they focus on a couple of key things.
Okay.
First, top management buy-in is crucial.
Okay.
If leaders understand and champion Agile principles,
Right.
it can trickle down and create a more receptive environment.
So it sounds like even in a hierarchical culture, leadership can play a huge role in creating a more Agile-friendly environment.
Huge.
What else did the research suggest?
The other key factor is transparency.
Yeah.
In hierarchical cultures, information is often closely guarded.
Hmm.
But Agile thrives on open communication and shared knowledge.
Right, because if teams don't have access to information across different departments,
Exactly.
it creates silos and slows everything down.
Exactly. So even if you're in a hierarchical organization,
Yeah.
there are steps you can take to make Agile work.
Yep.
Fostering open communication from leadership down and promoting transparency across the organization can create pockets of agility, even within a more traditional structure.
So it's not about completely dismantling the hierarchy,
Right.
but about finding ways to work within that existing structure to create a more agile environment.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's move on to another cultural dimension, group culture.
Okay.
This one seems like it might be a more natural fit for Agile.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Group cultures are all about teamwork, collaboration, empowering employees.
Right,
And this aligns beautifully with the social aspects of Agile.
right.
Self-organizing teams, open communication, valuing diverse perspectives.
That's great news for anyone working in a group culture.
Yeah,
It suggests that adopting Agile could really enhance team effectiveness.
absolutely.
But I'm guessing there's some nuances here.
You're right. While group cultures generally align well with Agile, there are still some potential cultural bumps in the road.
Okay.
For example, the research highlighted that cultures with a strong emphasis on collectivism might struggle with certain aspects of Agile,
Oh, that's interesting.
especially the emphasis on individual initiative.
I'm curious to learn more about that. Can you elaborate on how collectivist cultures might clash with individual initiative within Agile?
Yeah, in collectivist cultures, group harmony and avoiding individual recognition are often prioritized.
Either way.
While this can foster amazing teamwork, it can also make it difficult for individuals to step up and take ownership of tasks, which is crucial for self-organizing Agile teams.
That makes sense. Agile requires finding that sweet spot between individual talent and cohesive team dynamics.
Exactly.
And that balance might look different in different cultural contexts.
Absolutely.
So for our listener, what's the takeaway here?
If you're in a group culture, pay attention to how you balance individual initiative with team cohesion.
Okay.
The research suggests that clear guidelines for decision-making and conflict resolution are key.
Got it.
You need a framework that respects the collaborative culture while still allowing individuals to take ownership and drive progress.
That's really helpful. So we've covered hierarchical and group cultures. What about rational cultures?
Sure.
How do they align with Agile?
Now, this is where things get a bit surprising.
Okay.
At first glance, you might think a culture focused on competition and achieving goals wouldn't be a good match
Right.
for Agile.
I would think that too.
But the research actually found that rational cultures can benefit both the social and technical streams of Agile.
Really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, think about it. Rational cultures are incredibly market-oriented.
Mm-hmm.
They're always looking for ways to improve and gain a competitive edge.
Right.
That constant drive to be better, faster, more efficient
Mm-hmm.
aligns perfectly with Agile's principle of continuous improvement.
So the drive that's already baked into a rational culture can be channeled to support the continuous improvement cycle of Agile.
Exactly.
Okay.
And remember, Agile teams are constantly collaborating with customers to ensure they're delivering value.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in a rational culture, that customer-centric approach is already ingrained.
Right.
It makes the transition to Agile a lot smoother.
So it's not just about the technical side.
Mm-hmm.
The market focus in a rational culture actually strengthens those collaborative aspects of Agile as well.
Exactly.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah. What else stood out to you from the research about rational cultures?
The research also found that rational cultures tend to be very data-driven in their decision-making.
Okay.
They track progress, identify bottlenecks, and make adjustments based on evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And this is crucial for Agile, where data-driven decision-making is key to continuous improvement.
So a rational culture can actually provide a very fertile ground for Agile to flourish.
It can.
It's fascinating how these seemingly different philosophies can complement each other.
It is. It shows that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to Agile.
Right.
The key takeaway is to understand your organization's culture and adapt the principles accordingly.
Right.
And that brings us to our final cultural dimension,
Okay.
developmental culture.
This is the one where the researchers basically said, Agile meet your perfect match.
I know, right? It really is a near-perfect match.
It sounds like the Agile dream team.
It is.
Yeah.
Developmental cultures are all about innovation, creativity, adaptability, embracing new technologies.
Yeah.
All core values that resonate perfectly with Agile principles.
So tell our listener more about this amazing synergy between developmental culture and Agile. What makes them such a power couple?
Think about what Agile teams need to thrive.
Okay.
They need to be able to self-organize, experiment, learn from their mistakes, and pivot quickly.
Mm.
A developmental culture provides the perfect environment for all of that.
Yeah.
It encourages risk-taking, open communication, and continuous learning.
It sounds like a breeding ground for Agile rock stars.
It is.
What else did the research highlight about the benefits of a developmental culture for Agile adoption?
One key finding was the strong sense of psychological safety in developmental cultures.
Okay.
This is crucial for Agile teams to perform at their best.
Right.
When people feel safe to speak up, share their ideas, and even admit mistakes, it leads to better collaboration and innovation.
So if our listener happens to be in a developmental culture, they're already well positioned for Agile success.
Yes, but even in a developmental culture, it's important to be intentional about nurturing the right values and behaviors.
Okay.
For example, ensuring that there are clear channels for feedback and continuous learning,
Okay.
and finding that healthy balance between exploration and exploitation.
Exploration and exploitation. Can you break those down for our listener? I think
Yeah.
those are really important concepts.
Of course. So in a developmental culture, it's easy to get caught up in constantly exploring new ideas and technologies.
Right.
But it's equally important to exploit those ideas,
Okay.
turn them into tangible results.
So it's not just about brainstorming and coming up with cool ideas.
Right.
It's about having the discipline to turn those ideas into actionable plans and deliver value.
Right. It's about finding that equilibrium between innovation and execution, which is crucial for Agile to really work.
This has been a fascinating look at how these 4 cultural dimensions interact with Agile in their own unique ways.
It really highlights how cultural nuances can have such a profound impact on something that might seem purely technical, like project management.
Absolutely. And one thing I really appreciate about this research is that it didn't just focus on software development. It looked at Agile across a wide range of industries.
That's right. They examined Agile implementations in manufacturing, healthcare, finance, even the public sector.
Wow. Which means our listener can apply these insights to their own organization, no matter what field they're in.
Exactly.
It's not just for tech companies.
Not at all.
So now that we've got a good understanding of these 4 cultural dimensions and how they can influence Agile, I think it's time to shift gears a bit and talk about some of the specific challenges that organizations face when they're trying to implement Agile methodologies.
Okay.
What do you think?
That sounds great.
Yeah.
I'm sure our listener is eager to hear about some of these challenges and, more importantly, how to overcome them.
Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting. You mentioned different industries adopting Agile.
Yeah.
A couple of the studies we looked at actually dug into how specific Agile frameworks fare in different cultural contexts. One that comes to mind is by Tolfo and Wasilwick,
Okay.
and they focused on extreme programming, or
Hey.
XP for short.
XP, for our listener who might not be familiar, could you give us like a quick overview of extreme programming?
Yeah, so essentially it's taking those core Agile principles we discussed earlier and kind of pushing them to the, extreme. Think
Right.
pair programming,
Okay.
where 2 developers work side by side on the same code, and continuous integration, where code changes are integrated frequently, even multiple times a day.
Sounds intense.
Yeah, it can be pretty intense.
So what did this research reveal about culture and XP?
They found that XP faced a lot of resistance in organizations with cultures that emphasized imposing solutions
Okay.
rather than continuous improvement.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
XP thrives on constant iteration and embracing change. So a culture that's resistant to those things would be a tough environment for it to take root.
Exactly. On the flip side, they found that cultures with strong internal communication and a focus on employee development, things like providing clear career paths and good benefits, were much more conducive to XP adoption.
So even within the Agile world, different frameworks might thrive in different cultural contexts. It's like finding the right soil and climate for a particular plant to flourish.
That's a great analogy. And I think what's really valuable about this research is that it moves beyond just saying culture impacts Agile.
Right.
It identifies specific cultural elements, both positive and negative,
Right.
that can make a real difference in how well Agile is adopted.
It's those specifics that can give our listener a real roadmap, right? Things to look for and address within their own organization.
Absolutely. It's about actionable insights, not just abstract concepts.
Right.
Another study that dives into specifics is one by Gupta George and Shia They use the CVF lens to examine how specific cultural traits within IT departments impact Agile,
Okay.
particularly the Scrum framework.
I remember that one. Didn't it find some interesting connections between the CVF dimensions and how teams actually implemented Scrum practices?
Yeah.
Like daily stand-up sprint reviews and retrospectives?
Yes, it's a great example of how culture shapes behavior.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in a hierarchical culture where control and sticking to process are paramount,
Right.
teams might struggle with the self-organizing aspects of Scrum.
I can imagine those daily stand-ups turning into formal reporting sessions with a
Right.
lot of emphasis on what's been done rather than open collaboration and problem solving.
Exactly. And retrospectives, which are designed to be a safe space for honest reflection.
Hmm.
And figuring out areas for improvement could easily devolve into blame sessions rather than opportunities for learning.
Which would totally defeat the purpose. It really highlights how a mismatch between the culture and the Agile methodology can actually undermine the very principles they're trying to implement.
It's a critical point this research emphasizes that it's not just about being agile.
Right.
It's about being agile in a way that aligns with your existing cultural context.
Right.
It's about understanding those potential friction points
Okay.
and finding ways to adapt.
You know, this brings up a question that I've been thinking about.
Okay.
We've been focusing a lot on how an organization's culture impacts Agile.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the other way around? Can Agile impact the culture?
That's a fantastic question, and it's one that several of the studies we looked at touched upon.
Yep.
There's a growing body of research suggesting that when Agile is implemented effectively, it can actually drive cultural change within an organization.
So it's not just a one-way street.
Agile can actually be a catalyst for evolving a culture to be more collaborative, innovative, and customer-centric.
Right. It's almost like a feedback loop.
The culture influences how Agile is adopted, and then the Agile practices, in turn, can influence and reshape the culture over time.
One study that comes to mind is by Nold and Michel.
Yeah.
While they weren't specifically looking at Agile, they developed a model for corporate agility that highlighted this interconnectedness of culture, systems, and leadership.
Yes, their model is incredibly relevant to our discussion. They found that organizations that successfully become more agile tend to have a few key things in common.
Right.
First, leadership that actively champions change.
Okay.
Second, systems in place that support flexibility and responsiveness. And, of course, a culture that embraces experimentation and continuous learning.
That's a great example of how Agile can be a catalyst for positive cultural change.
It is.
And it reinforces the idea that leadership plays a crucial role in this transformation.
Absolutely. It's not enough to just do Agile.
Right.
Leaders need to truly understand the principles, model the desired behaviors, and create an environment that supports Agile ways of working.
And for our listener, I think another key takeaway is that this cultural shift doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
It's an ongoing process, a journey of continuous learning and adaptation.
Right. And it's a journey that will look different for every organization. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to Agile transformation.
Now, speaking of different journeys, I'm curious to dig into some of the specific challenges that organizations often face when trying to implement Agile.
Okay.
The research highlighted several common roadblocks, didn't it?
It did, and many of them directly relate to the cultural dimensions we've been discussing.
Okay.
Resistance to change, for example, which we know is common in hierarchical cultures, was a recurring theme.
That's not surprising. People naturally resist change, especially if they feel like they're losing control or that their established ways of working are being threatened.
Exactly. And this resistance can manifest in a lot of ways,
Okay.
from passive-aggressive noncompliance to outright sabotage of Agile initiatives.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That sounds unpleasant to say the least.
Yeah.
So what can organizations do to overcome this resistance?
Communication is key.
Okay.
Leaders need to clearly articulate the why behind the Agile transformation.
Okay.
It's not enough to just say, we're doing Agile now.
Right. They need to paint a picture of how Agile will benefit the organization,
Exactly.
the teams, and the individuals.
Right. And they need to involve people in the process.
Okay.
Instead of dictating change from the top down, create opportunities for people to provide input,
Okay.
share their concerns, and feel like they're part of the solution.
That makes a lot of sense. People are much more likely to embrace change if they feel like they've had a voice in shaping it.
Absolutely. And training is also crucial.
Okay.
You can't just throw people into the deep end of Agile and expect them to swim.
Right.
They need to understand the principles, the practices, and how to use the tools.
It's like learning a new language.
Exactly.
You need some basic vocabulary and grammar before you can start having conversations.
I like that analogy. And just like learning a language, Agile adoption takes time, patience, and a willingness to make mistakes along the way.
Another challenge that came up in the research was lack of management support. We touched on this a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
But it's worth emphasizing how crucial it is for leaders to be actively involved in the Agile transformation.
It's absolutely essential if leaders aren't on board.
Right.
It sends the message that Agile isn't a priority, and that can quickly derail any efforts to implement it.
It's like trying to build a house without a foundation.
Exactly.
It's just not going to work.
Right.
Leaders need to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Right. They need to demonstrate their commitment by providing resources, removing roadblocks, and most importantly, modeling the Agile values and behaviors themselves.
And I think another challenge for a lot of organizations is finding that right balance between Agile and existing processes and structures.
Yeah.
It's not always about throwing out the old and bringing in the new wholesale.
You're absolutely right. It's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
Sometimes it's about figuring out how to integrate Agile principles into existing workflows.
It's like adding a new spice to a familiar recipe. You don't want to completely change the flavor, just enhance it.
I love that.
Yeah.
And this is where things can get tricky.
Okay.
It requires careful planning communication
Right.
and a willingness to experiment and adjust as you go.
And it might mean challenging some long-held assumptions about how things should be done.
For sure, Agile is all about challenging the status quo, finding better ways to work, and delivering value faster.
Speaking of value, another challenge that often pops up is measuring the success of Agile transformations. It's not always easy to quantify the benefits.
You're right. It's not always as simple as pointing to a spreadsheet and saying, look, our productivity went up by X%.
Right. Agile is about so much more than just numbers.
Exactly.
It's about improving collaboration, communication, customer satisfaction, things that can be harder to measure.
Exactly. That's why it's important to identify the right metrics for success. Okay.
Metrics that align with the organization's overall goals and values.
So it's about finding those indicators that tell a story, that paint a picture of how Agile is impacting the organization in a positive way.
Yes. It might be things like increased customer satisfaction, faster time to market, improved employee morale, or even a reduction in the number of meetings.
The key is to choose metrics that are meaningful and relevant to the organization's specific context.
Absolutely. And it's important to track those metrics over time.
Okay.
See how things are trending and make adjustments as needed. Remember, Agile is all about continuous improvement.
This has been a really insightful discussion about the challenges of implementing Agile.
Yeah.
It's clear that it's not always a smooth ride,
Right.
and that there are many factors to consider, but it sounds like the potential benefits are significant.
They really are. And even if the journey is bumpy at times, the destination is well worth the effort. Yeah, it really does feel like those benefits of becoming a more agile organization outweigh the challenges. It makes me think about something you said earlier about how Agile is really all about embracing change.
Yes, you hit the nail on the head. It's like that old saying,
Right.
The only constant is change. And in today's fast-paced world, organizations that can adapt quickly definitely have an edge.
Which brings us back to one of the key themes that emerged from all this research.
Yeah.
The importance of cultivating an Agile mindset.
Absolutely. It's not enough to just adopt the practices. You have to cultivate a way of thinking that embraces flexibility, collaboration, and continuous improvement.
And that mindset shift needs to happen at all levels of the organization.
Yes.
Starting from the top.
I completely agree. Leaders need to set the tone, model the behaviors, and empower their teams to really embrace Agile principles. I'm reminded of a study by Sheffield and Lemaitre, where they looked at factors contributing to successful Agile projects. They found that the experience level of the team was a key predictor of success.
Now, that's interesting. Why do you think that is?
Well, it makes sense when you think about it. Experienced Agile practitioners have not only mastered the practices, they've also internalized the mindset. They know how to navigate those inevitable challenges and keep things moving forward.
I see what you mean. It's like the difference between someone who's read a book about surfing and someone who's actually ridden a wave. The theoretical knowledge is important, but the real learning happens when you're out there experiencing it firsthand.
That's a perfect analogy, and
Yeah.
it highlights how important it is for organizations to create opportunities for their people to get that practical experience with Agile. It could be through pilot projects,
Right.
workshops, or mentoring programs.
The key is to create a safe space for experimentation and learning,
Yes.
where people can try new things,
Yes.
make mistakes, and learn from those experiences.
Exactly. And this ties back to what we talked about earlier, the importance of psychological safety.
Right.
When people feel safe to take risks, they're more likely to innovate and come up with creative solutions.
It sounds like it's not just about having the right tools and processes in place.
Right.
It's about creating a culture where people feel empowered to think differently
Mm-hmm.
and challenge the status quo,
Exactly.
which makes me think about the competing values framework again.
Okay.
We've talked about how each of those cultural dimensions can impact Agile in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But could there be a way to combine the best of each culture
Yeah.
to create a truly amazing Agile environment?
That's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
Just imagine a culture that embraces the structure and efficiency of a hierarchical culture,
Okay.
the teamwork and collaboration of a group culture,
Yeah.
the market focus and drive for results of a rational culture, and the innovation and adaptability of a developmental culture.
It sounds pretty unstoppable, right?
It does, doesn't it?
Like the ultimate Agile powerhouse.
It does, and it's not as far-fetched as it might seem.
Really?
There are organizations out there that are finding ways to blend elements of these different cultures
Okay.
to create truly agile and high-performing work environments.
So for our listener, the challenge isn't just to figure out what their dominant culture is,
Right.
but to think about how they might be able to cultivate elements of the other cultures
Mm-hmm.
to create a more balanced and agile ecosystem.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot, that unique blend of cultural ingredients that will allow Agile to truly thrive in their organization.
And it's important to remember that culture isn't static.
Right.
It's something that can be shaped and influenced over time,
Mhm.
even through small everyday actions.
That's such a crucial point. Every interaction, every decision, every initiative can play a role in creating a more agile and adaptive culture.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into the world of Agile culture.
It has.
We've explored the complexities of Agile, the different cultural dimensions that impact its success,
Right.
and the challenges and opportunities that come with Agile transformation.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we've given you, the listeners, some valuable insights and tools to help you navigate your own Agile journey.
We certainly hope so.
So to our listener, we encourage you to keep learning, keep experimenting, and keep challenging the status quo.
Yes.
And remember, the most important ingredient in any Agile transformation is a willingness to embrace change and continuously improve.
Until next time.